All right. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to LinkedIn Live with MZ Burning Glass. I'm your host, Remy Verstraete. And today I am joined by Rucha Van Kudre and Will Marco, two of our senior labor market economists. They are here to comment on the BLS Employment Situation Report, which came out just this morning, a little while ago. So it is hot off the press and still fresh in our minds, and we're going to have them dive right in and help us make sense of it. So, Will, I'd like to start with you. Um, are you surprised? Is this what you expected? Help us kind of get oriented. What's the big headline here?
So to say I'm surprised is an understatement. This was not what we were expecting, and pretty much everything I thought I was going to say this morning, I had to throw out the window. We thought that Omicron was going to loom large over this report, and we were going to see tepid job growth or even job declines. We saw the exact opposite. We saw over 460,000 new jobs added, which nobody was expecting. Most people were saying at best maybe 150,000 would be added. And it really was economy-wide. We saw it across many different sectors. So I think that this really flew in the face of what everybody was expecting. It's a big win for the administration. It's a big win for anybody who, really wanted to demonstrate that the economy is still growing. But it's also got some implications for employers who they really recognize that they're still hiring. They still have a lot of pent-up demand. And even with some indication in the report that Omicron did have an impact, we're still seeing incredibly strong growth, which suggests that the job market may be acting almost like a spring. Like we're still pulling back on it because of Omicron. But when we let go, when Omicron lessens up, we could see even more pent-up demand driving job growth even further. So this is definitely a surprise. Nobody was expecting this. And I think it really demonstrates the ongoing strength of the economic and jobs recovery.
Wow. Okay. Rucha, can we have you comment on that as well? How did
Sure.
this strike you?
Yeah, I completely agree with Will. This was very much not what most people were expecting. And I think particularly coming off our JOLT report, right, which we saw that, openings were still very high, quit rates were still high. I think, everyone was a little bit worried that this report would show something opposite now that we're into January. And instead, it really seems like things are pretty consistent. With that over 400,000 job gain, which was similar to what we had last month. Things are still looking pretty strong and things seem to be growing. I think an interesting point is that, one of the places, particularly in some of the other surveys we had seen, were things like retail trade and accommodation and food services might be taking a hit. And instead we saw job growth in both of those areas. And so I think that's exciting for us.
Yeah, that is exciting. Speaking of those specific industries, and back to you, Will. Are there any other particular industries that you want to highlight? Any big news for people focused on those specific industries?
Absolutely. I think, again, the surprises never cease to amaze with this report. We saw incredibly strong growth in leisure and hospitality, over 150,000. We saw very strong growth in food services, over 100,000. And we even saw strong growth in areas where we really needed some growth, like transportation and warehousing, which was up over 50,000. And that in particular is going to hopefully help to abate some of the supply chain challenges that we've had. Will it get us all the way there? Probably not. But I think that it at least is a step in the right direction, certainly for that industry as well as many others. But I think that this, again, really shows that there's so much pent-up demand across the workforce as a result of the past 2 years and the pandemic. Even with Omicron, we're still seeing such strong growth industries across many different industries. So I think that it really hammers home just how strong the job market is, even with all of these headwinds flying in our faces as a result of Omicron.
Yeah. For employers who are thinking about hiring, how should they be thinking about this? What does this mean for them? Any comments on that, Rucha?
I think, as we've been saying, it's still a tough market out there, right? There are still a lot of openings. And if you take a look at some of the unemployment numbers that were just released, right, unemployment is basically constant. The labor force participation rate actually ticked up slightly, which is nice. But I still don't think there's quite enough people going around for the jobs that we need, right? And that employers need to fill. So I think there's still going to be a lot of competition out there, and we're going to continue to see employers really, fighting over getting people into their doors.
Yeah.
No, just to piggyback on that, I think that's a great point, Rucha. I mean, employers really are still in a dogfight for talent. It is incredibly difficult for employers to find the talent that they need. That's what we're hearing from everybody we're talking to, especially for the low wage workers, where we're seeing the strongest growth in fields like leisure and hospitality and food services. So employers, they're really going to have to get creative in how they go out and find these people when they're already recruiting from a reduced pool of talent for those jobs. We also saw some evidence in this report that even though the job growth was strong, Omicron is still keeping a lot of people home. We saw that about, I believe it was 1.8 million people said that they couldn't even go out and look for work as a result of either having COVID or having to care for somebody with COVID or other COVID related reasons. And so employers, they're going to have to get creative in not just how they think about pay and benefits, but also how they think about some of the intangible things that they can offer these workers. Maybe it's training, maybe it is career advancement opportunities. And so I think employers, they're really going to have to do everything that they can to both find the talent, but then also incentivize the talent to come and work for them.
Right, right. Well, thank you. Looking ahead, kind of what's the next big report on the horizon? What are you looking forward to as far as being able to track trends?
I mean, we'll be waiting for, the January JOLTS will be released at the beginning of next month. And I think that'll be really helpful for sort of looking more specifically at where we're seeing differences in terms of hires and quits. And I think that'll be a good time to keep an eye on some of the industries we've mentioned that we think were particularly hit hard to see if that affected any of people's behaviors.
Right. Okay, great. Any last words or final comments that you haven't been able to get out so far?
Just one last thing that I'd hammer home is that I think that even with these surprisingly strong numbers, there's still a lot of room for growth in the job market. We saw that even with these strong numbers, there is still evidence that COVID did show up in the numbers. It still looms large. We still saw, as I mentioned, 1.8 million people couldn't even look for work. We saw that there were, as it was actually an uptick in the number of people who were working remotely, who were teleworking as a result of the pandemic, which means that when those people go back to the office, that could lead to a surge in demand for all of the services that they're going to consume once they get out of the house, whether it's food, whether it's haircuts, whether it's anything else that requires you to actually be in person to consume it. So I think that there's still a lot of pent up potential demand in the economy and by extension in the workforce, which means that we might be seeing, we're still pulling back on that spring. And once we let go, there could be even stronger job growth on the horizon.
Wow. Yeah, domino effect. It'll be interesting to watch. Okay. Well, thank you very much. That does it for us for this morning. Thank you, Will. Thank you, Rucha. And you can join us next time on LinkedIn Live. We'll be back helping you make sense of the numbers and keep track of the economy. Thanks so much. I'm Remy, signing off.